Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world and what time of day you're watching this, of course. And whether you're watching us live or on replay, it's much more fun live. So come along and you get to say hi on the chat and all sorts of things like that. Hi to everybody who's been saying hello and telling me about the weather. Yeah, it is absolutely freezing here in Dallas, and I mean really freezing. We've got people from Indonesia today. Blancon FA. Hi, hello, and thanks for joining us. And Stuttgart, we've had people from Austin, Paul from Austin, I've flashed them up as well. And Francis, who's often here from very wet Wilton in the UK. Looking forward to an overview of Docker. It's going to be a really, really cool webinar today. I've got some slides that explain Docker in case you're not sure what it is, talks about the pros and cons, why you'd want to use Docker, and also some pretty good demonstrations of how to use it so that you can get a general idea as well. And we're going to be using it with Rad Studio. We're going to create an app with Rad Studio and bump it into Docker and see it running. Hi from Western Massachusetts, chilly here. Feels like 4 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, next week it's going to be 72, I think they said on Tuesday, which 72 Fahrenheit. Not centigrade, that'd be too awful. But 22 centigrade, I think it is, something like that. And so it's pretty crazy. Jude says, good evening. And Satya says, good noon, Ian. Hello, Satya. Oh, I know you. I saw you on LinkedIn, I think, or something like that. Yes. From Chicago in the USA. Yes. Brilliant. Radon from Germany as well. And Jude is from Qatar. Fantastic. Radon is near Berlin. And somebody mentioned, I can't remember that you mentioned being near Denmark. I am in Denmark at the end of April. There's a user group meeting, or what would you call it? A user conference in Denmark, and I'll be there for 2 whole days, presenting both days. We'll get that advertised shortly. Kirk says he's in Lake Erie, not actually in Lake Erie, he's from Lake Erie, and South Carolina for absolutely. And Charles is in Virginia. Fantastic place. I like Virginia Beach, by the way. I've been there just up the road. Not in, well, it's kind of in Virginia, but you know what I mean. Virginia Beach, love it. My father-in-law used to live there. And Kirk says, once you get to minus 40, it's the same. Yeah, minus 40 centigrade and minus 40 Fahrenheit. That's when the 2 scales converge. And I have been out in a minus 40 wind chill when I lived in Nebraska, and don't do it. That's the only thing I can say is very cold. You literally can feel your teeth freezing at that temperature. It was incredibly cold. Not good. Limburg in Germany. Hello there. Tus to all my friends in Germany. I hope you're doing well. And Claudio Vasquez. Bom dia to you from Portugal. So I hope you're doing well. Look, okay, so today I've got a lot of slides. We're going to talk about Docker. It's a very interesting technology. You would be surprised to find out that actually you can run Delphi apps in Docker. There are some limitations, but we'll talk about that during the slides. And then I'm going to do a quick demo that shows you a very simple app running in Docker. And then we'll talk about some other images as well, because you can do some pretty amazing things with Docker once you set your mind to it. Just a quick reminder, because I just want to make sure we talk about it every time until we're ready. In June, if you're in Europe, and I know lots of you aren't, if you could get to it, you should go to the Delphi Summit. We're hoping that it's going to be the biggest one in Europe for many years. Last year was amazing. It was put on my tech partners GDK, who are Delphi-only software house, as you may or may not be aware, consultants, and I forget what they would term themselves, but anyway, great company. You know, Delphi literally on the outside of their buildings. They've got offices in Brazil and the Netherlands and the UK, and they're running this. I'll be there. Marco Cantu will be there. I say this every time. So Antonio Zapata, few surprise guests, which I don't think they've announced yet as well, but definitely if you can go, you should go. If you're thinking about going to Europe, time it with this Delphi summit. It'll be awesome. Come and meet me, hang out with me. Let's talk about Delphi and development. I'm no one special. I'm just a normal guy, and so don't approach me in some weird way because I'm on the YouTube or something. That's nonsense. I'm just a software developer like you. Who else have we got? Lindbergh in Germany, and Paul McGee says hi ho. Hello, Paul. How are you? I hope you're not too cold up there. And Lucas says hello from Croatia. Okay, let us get right into it because I've got quite a lot of slides and the demo is pretty intense as well. So we'll get to that. Let me just see if I can get my slides to do something useful. I'm going to share my screen like this, and yeah, there you go. And I'm going to turn a normal guy that's aspirational. Very rude. Yeah, I'm far from normal, as anybody who knows me would say so as well. And Björn says hello from Aalen in Germany, and my local friend Steve Allman from Sherman in Texas, which is just up the road, not far from me. Wellen is in the province of Limburg. There you go. Right, so I'm going to turn my camera off and let me make my slides work and see if I can do this, because it doesn't matter how often I do this, PowerPoint will never resize things for me in the way that I want. So I have to do this as I go along because it's just frustrating. If I could talk to someone on the what do we call it? The Microsoft PowerPoint team, then I would tell them about this and say this is really irritating. But there you go. Okay, so let me just. I need to hide that QR code, don't I? Because otherwise it's going to get in the way. Good. Hello from Cape Town. Wow, fantastic. Normally it's just a setting on the dryer. Yes. Everyone is extremely eccentric but afraid to let it show. Yeah, I'm not. As we all know. Right, let's get into it. So let's talk today about our subject. Today we're talking about Docker. And if you're not sure who I am, because some people that join, they just find our channel by accident, which is fine. And if you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn, then click on that like and subscribe button. I'm not so worried about the likes, but the subscribe and then the little bell icon. Same on LinkedIn. You can subscribe on LinkedIn as well. That way you'll get notified every time we go live, which is very useful. If you don't know who I am, my name's Ian Barker and I'm the Embarcadero developer advocate. You can email me, please do, at ian.barker@embarcadero.com. You can read about me and the things I get up to at about.me/Ian Barker. And today's slides will be up on the blog when I can get to it. And you can get to them on tinyurl.com/Docker30. I'm a little bit behind my blog post at the moment because we had the 30th anniversary of Delphi's release last Friday, and it's been super busy for me because rather rashly I said, hey, let's do 30 webinars to celebrate 30 years of Delphi. And oh boy, I really bit off quite a lot of a thing there, and it's a lot of work, but it seemed to be like people people like it, so that's good. So that's who I am. And today we're talking about how to deliver your apps in Docker containers. And specifically today, I'm going to show you how to do some RAD Studio apps. But what I'll do is I'll cover what Docker is to start off with, because not everybody has used it or seen it. And it's one of those things that requires a little bit of explanation. But once you get your head around it, it's actually fairly easy. So what is Docker? Well, Docker is open source. and literally you can go up there and grab hold of all sorts of things. I think they actually say open platform rather than open source, but when you ask, if you do some research on something like ChatGPT or something like that, they will say open source platform. It allows you to package your apps into containers, and we'll talk about containers in a moment, but basically packets, little packages. Put your app into these packages. They're a bit like a virtual machine, but actually they're not really a virtual machine, because you don't really see, like with a virtual machine, you tend to see an operating system or something like that. And a virtual machine is literally like dialing into your computer remotely or something like that. That's what a virtual machine is like. Whereas a container is a bit more like a service, like a Windows service or something like that, or a Linux daemon. You can have Windows or Linux Docker images, and it supports both. But to be honest, Linux is way, way more popular, and I mean like by far. There are some narrow use cases, for example, some Windows servers for things like web servers, and some of Microsoft's own little Docker containers contain services wrapped up nicely. There are corporates that will wrap up Windows Docker containers, but generally speaking, when you're talking about a Docker container, it tends to be Linux. That is the most common use case. And well, some facts about Docker. Basically, if you go to www.docker.com, you can read about it there. And they say develop faster, run anywhere. Well, I don't know whether that's true. I think it's probably easier to say deploy faster and get your apps into the hands of people in a way that's nicely packaged up. That's what it does. And whilst we're at it, I'm going to say hello to Makhloufi in Algeria. Thank you, my friend, for joining. And Ron Melitza is here from Washington State. Thanks, Ron, for joining us. And also, oh, am I accidentally showing that? Sorry about that. I didn't realize I was still showing that that comment. What else have we got? Johannesburg and Ziad from Algeria. We're all in here today. Right, so let's carry on with what we were talking about. So they say develop faster, run anywhere. I don't agree that develop faster is true. I think that it's probably more accurate to say deploy your apps more securely and faster. That's what I would say. And in fact, Richard Hatherall is in the chat, and he's saying hi. Richard is actually quite an expert at Docker, so I'm a little bit nervous now because he's probably better at this than me. But I'm going to explain it, and we'll let Richard correct my facts as I go along. He's like my official fact checker. How's that? But that's it. Go to Docker.com. Lots of ready-made Docker images are available. You will find many, many versions of Docker images ready to go. So you can go up to hub.docker.com, and once you've installed Docker, you can actually pull down a Docker image of some type, a container, and it might contain a fully configured web server, for example, or it might contain all the things you need to run some kind of compiler, a ready-made Python or Django environment, a bit like you can do with virtual machines and that kind of thing, except, like I say, it's more like having a service rather than a virtual machine. It's packaging your app so it runs in a particular way, and I'll talk about the packaging in a moment and the advantages of it. When it comes to pricing, the fact it's open source, quote open, doesn't necessarily mean it's free. They do have a personal level, and it's actually very generous. And the chances are the majority of the people that are joining this webinar, it's free for you. Okay, but only you can decide what license you need based on your own circumstances, because it's always like these things. If you go and look at the licensing, you'll need to work out exactly what applies and doesn't apply to you. But I think majority of the viewers here today are probably going to fall into the Docker Personal category. But even if you're going to Docker Pro, where you get some extra features like a build cloud and test containers and synchronized file shares and all sorts of crazy stuff like that, um, and also debug and responsive technical support, then it's $9 a month, which for many people that is a kind of reachable price or an achievable price. And then you start looking at more expensive things like team options and stuff like that when there's a group of you or an enterprise or a company. Now, some companies use Docker to deploy services across branches. So let's say you're a multi-branch company, you've got a Dallas branch and you've got a London branch and you've got a I don't know, New York branch or a Paris branch, and you want to deploy a bunch of network services or web packages or a web app or anything really, and you want to make it repeatable and want to make it so that it's secure and you expect the same behavior in New York as you do in Dallas, as you do in London, then that's what businesses tend to do for Docker, and Docker Business comes into its own, $24 per user per month. Well, you can decide whether that's going to be viable for you or not. Why would you use Docker? Well, the Docker is like the magic potion when it comes to getting your apps to work over. Richard Howell says he's just here for moral support. And David Isaiah says he can't wait to install a RAD server container on my Synology NAS box. I'm already running Jellyfin Media Server in a container. There you go. So David he's already using containers. And that's the thing, as David I says, you can run it on a NAS box if you know what that is. If you don't, Google it. But it can run, a Docker container can run pretty much anywhere. And by anywhere, I mean Windows, Mac OS, and Linux are the main desktop operating systems, but you can also run in the cloud. And this is one of the things that probably a lot of Delphi devs find the most useful, most interesting, that you can have it running on the Elastic Compute Cloud of Amazon, which is a very interesting system. We'll talk about a little bit in a moment. And when Richard comes for his next webinar with me, we'll talk about that as well. Google Cloud Platform, which is, their kind of variation of what Amazon does as well. I think they would claim that Amazon's a variation of what they do, but hey, let them fight that out. But it's a cloud-based platform that allows you to run containers as well. Heroku is a very popular, widely used type of cloud-based or distribution system, and Kubernetes, depending on your accent, is the de facto standard for what they call marshalling your containers around places. So if you've got more than one container, and in a business you could well have several, Kubernetes is the thing that allows you to control those in a kind of admin sort of way. It's best if you Google Kubernetes like that and go and have a look, because it's one of these things where if you get it, if you get it and you understand what it does, then it's easy. But until the penny drops, it's one of those things where you think, I have no idea what this means, and go from there. Why would you use Docker? Well, Amazon Elastic Container Registry is pretty awesome, for example. And what that means is that you can, in fact, go there and have a look, aws.amazon.com/ECR to read all about it. But they do make it a lot easier with a very nice little graphic that shows what you do. And that is to get your app running in the cloud. And this is virtually the same as doing it on Windows or on the desktop. You literally write your code, and then, as this graphic shows, package it as a Docker image. And we're going to do exactly that in a moment in the demo. You package it as a Docker image, and then you can push it up to the Amazon Elastic Container Registry, which is a bit like a kind of I don't know, app store for containers, and it could be private or it could be public. You can publish it and things like that, and then drain your bank account very quickly if you make a bit of a mistake and write the most popular possible container, and it gets downloaded bazillions of times. But that's really it. With that examining Amazon Elastic Container Registry, it is a place where you can put your Docker images. Docker Hub is another one, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But that's it. You literally write your app, package it into a Docker image, and you can have it in the cloud. Doesn't matter whether you wrote it in Delphi. It could be a Python app. It could be something else. But you absolutely can do it in Rad Studio with Delphi as well, and it'll be running in the cloud, or on the desktop on Windows, or on the desktop on Mac OS, or on the desktop in Linux, and all of those at the same time, and Google Cloud. So it's a very great playing field leveler. It will allow you to, Docker will allow you to actually, distribute your apps and have them run on alien systems. It's a great thing. So the advantage of a container, the specific advantages of a container, are that everything is self-contained, hence the name container. And it means that all your dependencies, like if you've got a load of things that need to be installed, let's say you've got some interbase license and you've got some DLLs or actually static libraries or something like that, and you've got some database and configuration files, and you've got a bunch of images, and you've got some services running at the same time, and they all rely on each other, so you want them in one place and you put them all in the container, you can do that. Because of the way it works, you target a specific type of container, and then after that, you don't need to worry about the dependency. Once you set your container up so that it's got those dependencies working, you're good to go. It's as easy as that. Hello, Nigel. A brief visit. Good. Catch us on the replay if you're going to disappear off. Yes, so in the container, there's no dependency problems because you solve those by creating that container. And that container then is almost going to work on anything, as long as that anything, that Mac or that Linux box or Windows box can run Docker images, then you'll find it will be able to run your Docker image. Doesn't matter how you created it. It creates a kind of virtualization itself. It's very, very simple. Once you have installed Docker on the target machine, the Docker runtime, then you can literally use a command line. It's a one-line command. So say, Docker pull and then the name of the image, and then run it, and off it goes. You could put it in a batch file. You could literally have a batch file that someone downloads from somewhere, a command file or something like that, a script, and have a couple of lines in it, and we go and download what you need to do, and off it goes. And Patrick says, please show workflow for building a Linux container containing a Delphi app. I've got some good news for you, Patrick. That's exactly what I'm going to do. So simple installation, not problematic at all. In fact, so simple, I'm going to show you through during this webinar, including building the app and including building the container. It allows repeatable behavior that's independent of the host operating system. So once you've got your Docker container worked out and you've debugged it and made everything work, and that's just like any other system, if your program crashes or something like that, then because of some stupid bug, because as soon as they type in the word webinar, it makes it keel over. You've got to fix all those problems first. You can test those locally, but once it's tested locally, you put it up to somewhere like the Elastic Cloud container repository, ECR. Anyway, whatever that is, or Docker Hub, or one of the other places, because there's a few places as well. Once you put it up there, then the person downloads it on their machine, and it will work exactly the same, identically, because the container contains the necessary things to make your app run, and it's completely internal to that container. It's not only is it independently the host operating system, it's actually isolated from the host operating system, which makes it even more secure. A couple of questions which I'll address. Hector asked about licensing. Actually, I did sort of cover that at the start. Go to docker.com and look at the licensing. In most cases, it's free, to do what you need to do, but you need to read the license and see whether it applies to your use case. Paul Dardo asked about graphical Delphi apps, and actually, that's a good answer there. If you There's a couple of different ways of creating containers. I'm going to show both of them in a moment. Normally, a container is a non-visual app. Okay, it runs a bit like a Windows service or a Linux daemon, or a Mac daemon, and the idea is that it's supposed to be um, running and providing a service somewhere. So if it's interactive, then you might go to a web page and then interact with it on a web page. But it is, if you create an application that's got a user interface, a GUI interface, and there are explanations of that. I've got some links in a moment. Then you can go into you can make it interactive, and you can make it have like a terminal, I suppose is the best way of describing it. You can go to that app and you can have it in a web page. So in a way, it's like getting your Delphi apps to appear in a web container like that as well. It's more complicated than that, and it's kind of beyond the scope of this webinar because I'm going to show you how to do some simple stuff to keep us on track. But we'll talk about graphical apps shortly, and I've got some links to explain it as well. What about the licenses of any app you pack in the container? As long as your app is completely licensed, you're not included something where you have to pay a royalty for your app, and that probably uh, I think no Delphi app probably has any licensing unless it's got some kind of weird database licensing. There is no licensing that you need to apply. So it's completely included. It's wrapped. It's almost like taking a zip file and running it on someone else's computer as an application. That's the nearest thing you can get to a Docker file. Anyway, we'll come back to those in a moment. Raphael says, I containerized my Delphi 12 apps in Docker and then migrated them to Kubernetes 1.31 version with Containerd and Calico without Docker on Linux. Ubuntu. Yes. Again, this is kind of an intro to Docker, but you can do a lot. Once you get into it, you'll be like, wow, this is awesome. Anyway, let us do a demo, okay, so that we can have a look. So first off, what we're going to do is we are going to create a app, okay? And the app that we're going to create is basically this, okay? So here at the top, you can see .wiki. If you just Google Hello World console application, you'll find this page. But building a Linux Hello World app, and that's what I'm going to do with this, because I'm going to show you a Linux container. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, first off, I'm going to start actually creating that app. So in order to do that, we say File, New, Console Application, and it will create a console application that looks like that. And I'm going to say, write line, so output to the console line, hello Delphi. Now, I can go into here and say add platform and then choose Linux. If you want to understand how that works, let me just think where I do it. Yeah. Two things are happening. First of all, I have a Linux machine running on this address locally, and it's firewalled off before anybody tries, and it's open on port 64.211. I've also got my Mac and all the rest of it as well, because I'm set up to do proper development. And where is that stored? Well, if I start by first of all, let's create a Windows desktop Windows app so that you can see how it works. And by the way, just to make it so that it will appear in an easy repeatable place, what I've done is I've got the application up so that when it outputs the where does it put it? Here. When it outputs it, at the moment, it will output it to the default configuration. But for Linux, I've actually told it to put it somewhere else. Let me find it here. This one. Oh, no, maybe I haven't then. I did. Oh, that gone. Okay. Well, for Linux, I'm actually outputting it somewhere else, which I'll come back to in a moment. But anyway, um, so we've compiled it for Windows. And just to make sure, if I do a dir, in here, it will actually be somewhere else. Where will it be? Let me easier if I show you an Explorer because you know that's how it works. So here's my executable, and if I run it, you'll just see it flash and do nothing. So let me instead make that come out into a more reasonable place where we can get to it. So we want it to go to here. Let's do this. I'm going to set this up so that it goes to a repeatable place. Hello, computer. So my Delphi compiler output directory is going to be here. I'll compile this. Now we should see it appear there. Okay. So if I just go into my DOS prompt again, my command prompt, I think it's probably the easier way of saying it, and just do a dir, we can see there's the Docker Delphi test, Docker Delphi test .exe. Hello, Linux Delphi. Well, that's not strictly true, is it? Because we're not actually. We'll call it. We'll just to prove that this is actually an app. We'll do that, and just show this once again. Hello, Delphi Docker. Right. So we've got a Windows app, but actually, what we want is we want a Linux app. So we're just going to swap to this. And as I said before, I want to make sure that we're going to the right place. So I want to output it somewhere nice and repeatable. So it's going to go to there for Linux 64-bit. Okay. And I'm just going to delete those old files because we don't need them at the moment. So let's get rid of these. And I'm going to just compile it. So Control F9 will build it. And then it has created that application. Now, I can debug this as well, but let's just see what happens when I try and run it. So what I've got here is this is the Windows terminal, the newer version. I'm running Windows 11, and I can create all sorts of different types of terminal. If you're not familiar with WSL, Windows System for Linux, this is WSL2, and so this is basically running a copy of Ubuntu, I think it is, effectively. So in fact, if I do uname -a, it will tell me that this is Linux, basically, as you can see. So what I want to do is I want to run the app. Now, if I do this, you can see the files that I've got there. Okay. Someone's saying, could you also use wine in the container to run your Windows executable? You actually don't need to, Paul. You can actually create Windows containers, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Anyway, so if I just show that again, that file there, the Docker Delphi test, that is my Linux app. So if I do this, because as you know, with Linux, you have to do it this way, Docker Delphi test. / means in this folder, run that executable. Hello, Delphi Docker. And just to prove that this is actually a Linux app, I'm just going to Control F9 it again, and then go back to that prompt, run that again, and you can see that's a real app. Now, what you may notice is that I do not have PA server running. Okay. The only time I need PA server to create a Linux app is, first of all, in order to get the SDK. So you have an SDK here that gets downloaded, and you need to have the right one. I had several versions of Linux installed, and in order to create Linux, first of all, you need Delphi Enterprise, and secondly, you need to have some form of Linux setup. If I try and run that as it is without PA server running, then it's going to just hang. But I actually have PA server installed, and you can Google that. It's on the .wiki that tells you how to do it. But if I just do PA server like this and run it, it's just like the one that you've seen for Mac and creating iOS and Mac OS apps. But I can do that. Now I've got my PA server running. And if I do that, that's the IP address I'm running on. And so in here, if I go to my connection manager, there is my IP address that we got from the this here. And I've got the password, and I've clicked test connection, it's connecting. So I can then debug my Linux app if I wanted to. I don't want to do that, but that's how I got to the point where I had the SDK. So in order to get the SDK in the first place, you click on add, and then it will ask you what platform you're going to do, and then it will tell you what platforms are available and what SDKs are available. Okay, so sounds complicated, really isn't. You can literally create the app as it is. So we've created an app that is a very, very simple, straightforward Linux app. And we know it works because, as we said earlier on, if I just do that, we know that works. Okay. Now, the slightly more complicated part. Okay. So if I just clear this for a second. On my machine, I have got the Docker runtime installed already. But not only do I have the Docker runtime installed, but I also have the Docker desktop. And there's two things there. What is that saying? Oh, yes, I know what that is. So I've already installed a couple of images. But where do those images come from? Well, they come from Docker Hub. So if you actually go back and go to here, you can go and get more containers from Docker Hub. If I just pull that window up for a second and go to hub.docker.com, you'll see there's all sorts of containers. Let's choose Nginx, which is a web server. There is a container, and so if I wanted to have a ready-made container, and then by the look of it, 9,821,092 people have already done that. I can, if I click on here, it will show me what the command is to get that container installed on my machine. Now, what I actually did was I want to create an Ubuntu container, and Ubuntu is just a flavor of Linux if you don't already have knowledge of that. And I downloaded this one, exactly the same. So Docker pull Ubuntu, and that's a command line that I ran on here. So I just said, took the command that said docker pull ubuntu. But you don't need to worry about that. If you just look at the help, it will tell you how to do it. What that does, I've already installed Docker Desktop from Docker as well, and I showed you that earlier in the slides. I'm going to refresh that in a moment. And what I have, an Ubuntu image. Now, how does Docker actually work? Well, it's probably easiest if I show you what is in my folder. Okay, so in my folder to create my Docker image for the first time, I've got a file called Docker file, and this is the basic building block of any Docker container. And what that is a set of instructions, a standardized set of instructions that tells you how to create Docker containers. And if I just show you what's in mine, okay, I'm saying the first line in a Docker file is always where you're pulling from a copy of that image. So you remember we went to the Docker hub, okay, and we listed all those images. Well, I've got that Ubuntu one, and I have it installed on my machine, and just think of it as a template for now, a little template. My Docker file, I'm saying from that Ubuntu template, I want to base my image, my Docker container. Docker containers have got layers. So this is the first layer, and that first layer is my Ubuntu layer. So I'm saying I want to create a container that's basically running a standardized form of the latest version of Ubuntu. And you can actually do this and put a label at the end of it. So you might have one called, they always have stupid names, but like let's assume it's called Jumping Penguin or something like that, because they've always got ridiculous names. You could say, oh, I actually want to pull Ubuntu Jumping Penguin or whatever the stupid name is, and base it on a specific version. But if you don't do it, if you leave off that bit, that colon onwards, it assumes this, so it always picks the latest version of Ubuntu. Okay, but I'm just saying Ubuntu, and it'll pick the latest version. So the very latest version of Ubuntu will be picked. I'm saying that I want on Ubuntu for it to create a working directory and call it /app. Then I want to execute a command called copy the contents of my current directory in which this Docker file is located into that app folder. Okay, now my Docker file is located here. So what it's going to copy is this, actually. In fact, actually, when I think about it, it'll probably copy my project folder, but we're not too worried about that. But it will copy whatever's in there. So I'm going to, you could have like 75 different files in here, you know, and extra executables and all sorts of other things. There then follows a series of commands that you can run. Okay. And some of them are run, some of them are command. There's a few others as well, but the most basic one I've got at the moment is run this as a command. So I'm saying once my Ubuntu container is running and it's ready to go, I want you to run the /docker Delphi test app. I can pass it some parameters. So if I wanted to pass a username and password or some other weird parameters or whatever, this could be a script, this could be a Python app, this could be Python itself, and then the name of a file. It doesn't really matter. But for now, I'm just going to execute my Docker Delphi test. Right. So where is that? Just to remind you, I'm creating a folder with the Docker file in, and then that is my Linux executable that I created with Delphi. Okay. So to make that into something real, okay, what we do is we type in a simple command line command. So we type that in Docker, which is the Docker command, space build. So I want to build an image. Minus T is trash is the old one, I think. My Delphi app, and then in the current folder. And so I'm going to have a container called my Delphi app, and where it's going to be appearing is in these containers here. You'll see it shortly. So I'm going to do that now, and let's run it. So what it's doing is it's going to go away, and it is going to get a copy of the Ubuntu image. It's going to make an Ubuntu version. It's going to then copy, if you remember what it was said in my Docker file, it's going to copy everything from that folder into the /app area. And then once it does that, it's going to say, oh, when the container starts up, the command you're going to run is this, Docker Delphi test. So now, if I want to run that, there are two ways of doing it. First of all, this is the basic command that you would have somewhere else, and that is to run your Docker app. So you remember I called it up here, my Delphi app. So I'm going to say run my Delphi app, and it will already have appeared in my image, my Delphi app there. Okay, we've just created that. And by the way, it says that it's so many megabytes, but actually it's tiny in comparison. Okay, and it lists vulnerabilities and all sorts of things like that. But these are the commands and the dependencies in there. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to run that app, and what's going to happen? Well, hello Delphi Docker on Linux. Not very exciting, but I can assure you that is actually a Linux app running under DOS and running in a container. Now, the same would be true if I was on here and running it in Linux, and I haven't installed Docker on my Linux server here, but if I had, I could run that with exactly the same command on Linux, Docker run my Delphi app, and off you go. Now, that's great, but let's try something else. And that is, if we go into here, let's try and get it to actually wait for me to do a key press. So you notice at the moment, what happens is when I run it, it runs, and it's quicker the second time because the first time it's created that image and now it's ready to go. As soon as it runs, it just goes back to the command line. But what if we wanted to do some input? You know, it's asking for some information like, you know, license code or serial number or, I don't know, username or something like that. We want to do this. Great. So let's just compile this for a second. Okay. We can see down here it's compiled successfully. What do we do to make it work? Well, if I just run it the way it is at the moment, it's going to work. Okay, and the reason is that at the moment, just running that container as it is means the container just runs, and then when it reaches the end of whatever program I'm running out of my container, it'll just stop running. It'll just cease. I'm done. That's it. I'm finished. You can put a -d in there and get it to detach and do other things as well. But if I add the following in here, and most people remember this command line by saying docker run it. So run it. That means interactive, and basically that it's creating a virtual terminal. What does that app do? Well, if we just try and run that again, what it would do now is you see it's not come back to the command line. It's waiting for me to press a key. If I now press a key, then it runs. So we want to have that same behavior on Docker. So let's go back to Docker. Let's run -it. And actually, I have to build the app first, don't I? Then build it. Let's build it. Run it. Now it's sitting there waiting for me to type something. So it could be, you know, what's your move on a chess app, or, you know, do you want to play a thermonuclear war, or whatever it is. Matthew Broderick did in War Games, and as soon as I press a key, returns back. So behavior as it is in Linux, of course, because it's a Linux app, and off we go, and same behavior on Docker. So really, at this moment in time, that's not the most exciting demo. There are other demos as well. There are other packages that you can have packaged together, and I'm going to talk about those in a moment, and I'll actually answer some of your questions. So see, there's a load of questions come up, but that is really the basics of how to create a Docker app. It is dead simple, and I mean super simple. I've just spent probably 15-20 minutes talking about getting to the point where you can build a Linux app in the first place with Rad Studio, which is actually not difficult. Once you've created that PA server, and then you know, set the SDK out once, you never have to do it again. As long as your Linux doesn't update, you can always you know, build your Linux apps, and you don't need PA server. You only need PA server when you want to debug it, because it's got to run on there. So I'm running not in a true Linux. As such, I'm actually running WSL to when is this? Yeah, WSL2, and it's, you know, it's the real thing. And it's a proper Linux. You know, it does all the top and Fortune and all the other things that you do. I don't know if you've ever seen this. You can get your cow to say stuff and stuff like that. It's and they do like different versions of this cow that's dead and stuff like that. But it's Linux. It's not DOS. I'm interacting with that, and I can have my PA server there, and there it is running in my Linux. Look, it's a proper, you know, Valhalla is the name of my machine, because I'm a bit weird. But running PA server. So once you've set up your machine for Linux, you can create apps left, right, and center. Like I say, you can create GUI apps. If you do that, what will happen is that you will end up with a terminal, and the terminal window that you can go to, it is like a browser window. And it just depends on what the app's showing. If it's showing web pages, then yeah, you know, you go to a specific port, and excuse me, and you can create it there. There are ways of doing that. You can say, I forget how to do this now, but I think you say you create it. Oh, there's when you go to run a thing, there's it asks you for some optional settings. You can then say what ports are exposed. So, for example, with most of the ones, the containers that are web servers, they tend to be exposing port 80 or something like that. And so you could have on your server somewhere running a Docker container, your web server completely self-contained inside this inside a Docker container. But what's more importantly for Rad Studio and Delphi people is that you could be running PA server, for example, in a Docker container. Okay, and how does it do that? Well, there is basically the contents of the PA server Docker image. And I can actually show you a bit more of that. Let me just pull this over from my other screen. But PA server will run inside a Docker container, and this helps you, you know, deploy to Linux or something like that. But what's interesting is, look, see what this is? This is the Docker file, like I showed you earlier on. And if I click on that, here are the commands of a more complicated Docker image. So this is publicly available. I'm going to show you the links in a moment, but it is no more complicated than that Docker file. So Stephen says Docker is sort of a ubiquitous application installer. It's more like a virtual machine, or a bit more like the way that Windows App Store apps work, in that it's sandbox. About that in a moment. But yeah, I suppose you could argue it's a ubiquitous application installer. It's a bit like popping a zip file down to your machine and then executing the program inside the zip file. That's probably an easy way of looking at it. But it does a lot more than that because it does protects you from the container being able to do anything nasty because it doesn't really expose much to the operating system, which is pretty good. And the Docker container can die, screw up, lock up, freeze, and you can then just restart it and do other things as well. But as you can see in the Docker file for our PA server, it is copying the Ubuntu Jammy as an image, a base layer, and it does that directly from the Docker Hub. It then has a password, and the default on this is secure pass, which you really should not lose. And then some other things go on. So we run curl, and we get some stuff from the web, and we download PA server automatically, and we put it into the Docker image for the Ubuntu. And again, these are all programs that run in Delphi. PA server is a specialized version of RAD server and is written in Delphi. And so it pulls that all down and it does an apt-get. If you know Linux, then you'll know it's getting some front ends for Debian, because Ubuntu is on Debian. It does this, does that, and all the rest of it. So there's not that many lines. What is there? 57 lines, and there you have it. You have PA server running inside a Docker image. Now we'll talk more about that in a moment, but we have got multiple Docker images that we already supply to the public, including Interbase. So let's go back to my slides, and once again, good old Microsoft PowerPoint says, "Oh, you surely meant to have your presenter view maximized so you can't see anything else on the screen," and when in fact that is not at all what I want. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So if Docker interested you, but you're like, well, man, this is too complicated. I can't understand it. When in fact, really, it isn't. It's not complicated at all. But if it's something that you're not comfortable with, then you can use some other things as well. If it's testing, if you want to have a Windows machine, like a virtual machine that is secure, is sandboxed and can't wreck your computer, and you want to test out an app that does something nefarious or stupid or crazy or unwise, shall we say, then you can use a thing called Windows Sandbox. It's free, and it is volatile. So what happens is that when you are finished running the it will just vanish and kill everything in it. So you could install a whole bunch of programs to test an install routine, for example, or to test licensing or something like that of your app. And then when you close the sandbox, it wipes it out and completely zeroes it back. By default, it's not turned on. So you need to go into Windows. If you hit the Windows key where it says number 1 there, and then type in Windows Sandbox, if it doesn't offer it as an app, then instead of typing Windows Sandbox, type in Windows Features, and then choose Turn Windows Features on and off. Scroll down Windows Sandbox and tick that box. Okay, and what you will get is this, basically Windows running inside a window, and it's really cool. And if you want to see what that looks like, what I'm going to do is run it on my machine here. I don't know how well it's going to cope with 57 bazillion things happening at the same time, but let me just see if I can get it to come onto my other machine. It's starting up as we speak. My poor computer's going, what did you do? There's so many things happening. Come on, computer, you can do it. Come on. Windows Sandbox is drawing my machine. Let's get it done with. Talk amongst yourselves. It's normally quicker than this. Come on, computer. Not my app, it's Windows. I don't know, I'm going to give up in a minute if it doesn't hurry up. Come on, computer. I just did it like 10 minutes before the webinar started and the Windows Sandbox started immediately. So clearly it's cleared out some cache memory. I have a Hyper-V running as well, if you know what that is, because that version of Docker Desktop I've got set up is running Hyper-V. So Windows Sandbox uses that same technology. Maybe I killed the sandbox. I don't know. Okay, well, we'll come back to that another time. Sandbox, she dead. Okay. If it does start, I'll show you in a moment. What else? Alternative to Docker is a thing called Vagrant, which I just love that name for a product. What a fantastic product name. Vagrant. It's from HashiCorp. If you know who HashiCorp are, they're a kind of big bunch of nerdy techs, and they do all sorts of other things as well. You know what? Windows Sandbox is definitely not. I'm going to close it. It doesn't want to run. I've probably asked it to do too much. Vagrant, similar to Docker, it's community supported but less widely used. You can go to vagrantup.com and use it there. Facebook used to use it quite a lot, and they've stopped using it now, which may explain why this happens. When I went to the Vagrant documentation to try and grab some screenshots for you, every single link I clicked on not work. Which is bizarre. So their documentation help appears to be broken. Hopefully they'll fix it, but it's a bit of a non-starter if I say, hey, you should consider Vagrant, and then when you go there, the help doesn't work. These things happen. Ian says, are you holding your tongue right? Yeah, that's probably what it is. I probably didn't do it correctly. Another alternative, if you are a Linux person, if you're wanting to bundle your apps for Linux, then Snap, a very popular kind of app store bundler, I suppose, for Linux. If you think of how you bundle things for iOS and you bundle things for the Google Play Store for Android, or you bundle things for the Mac App Store, then Snap is kind of Ubuntu or Canonical, actually, to be precise, but it's kind of their take on an app store. It's only for Linux apps. You cannot do it for Windows, but it's a bit more like an app store experience. So you go in there and you can search on a public repository of stuff, and then it goes from there. Matthias Bollinger says, knowledgeable colleagues advise Docker Desktop for Windows is notoriously bad. Yeah, actually, I'm only showing this, Matthias, because I can't have everything running at the same time. So I don't normally use Docker Desktop for Windows. I actually just use the Docker command and go from there. The recommended approach, even on Windows, is to use Docker in the Windows subsystem for Linux. Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I was demoing it in a particular way for the benefit of the webinar. So snapcraft.io is where you go for Snap. It's a great system, but some people aren't very happy with Canonical for whatever reason and get a bit worried about doing a deal with them. I personally don't have a problem with them, but some people get a bit worried about it. But it's an interesting alternative. And the other one as well is Flatpak. And Flatpak is an organization in its own right. It's completely separate from everybody, as far as I'm aware. I don't think even Red Hat or anybody like that sponsor it. I think they are completely free and open source, so they're FOSS. And that means that, you're free to do what you want with it. Check the license. I always say this to whenever we're talking about these things. But if you go to Flatpak, spelled with a K.org, it's an interesting way of bundling things for Linux as well, if that's what your thing is. But don't forget, Docker, more importantly, runs on everything. So Mac, Windows, Linux, you name it, there's probably, in the cloud as well. And I think the most significant advantage of Docker is that you can take your Delphi Linux apps and have them running in that Amazon cloud, elastic, container resource. I think it's a very useful thing because you can then, make the apps cloud-based out of the box. We do have some official Embarcadero Docker images. Oh, yes, we do. We believe in Docker as a company. We did have a brief discussion with them about becoming like an enterprise. I forget what they call them, but I had a long series of meetings with the Docker people, and they were asking for some very outrageous amounts of money for us to appear higher in the searches. But we've only got a few images at the moment, so we don't really want to go there. But these are maintained by various people. I think Richard Hatherall might have had some input into these at some point, but the main person for that was Lucas. He did a lot of work on there, and a few others, people like Jim McKeith back in the day, myself as well. You'll probably see push, commits and things like that from me on there. And Antonio Zapata is another guy who works on those as well. So they are our official images, and we do support them. And if you post an issue in there, we will try and address it. We had one recently where someone was saying that something didn't work properly, and we'll go and do that. You'll notice the versions that we have there. There's a PA server to make Linux development easier, but there's also a RAD server for running a RAD server instance in Docker. You do need to license that because RAD server is licensed, but depending on the type of license you've got, if enterprise or something like that, then you are almost certainly covered by the license. But check that. And the same with Interbase as well. There's RAD server / Interbase one, and then a general Interbase image that runs an Interbase server in a Docker image. So, we're not just showing you how to use containerization, we actually use it ourselves. Didier says, I believe Docker runtime must be first installed on the client's machine on which the app should be deployed, which is intrusive mandatory prerequisites. Yeah. At the end of the day, the Docker runtime is what it is, and it's a way of packaging apps that work for you. Docker is more really targeted for things like server apps and stuff like that. I think is where that's the where it comes into play. So if you are running a server or a group of servers, then you are going to have multiple Docker images. That's almost certain. And in fact, most IT departments that I've dealt with prior to me working full time for Embarcadero, we came across people that had Docker all the time, was running something. The first question we get asked is, do you have a Docker image? And that was where we're at. So hub.docker.com/u/rad studio, or just search for Rad Studio and you'll find us. And you can also go to GitHub and see our Docker images there and see how we did some stuff to make things work. I'm not saying use Docker, that's the only solution. I'm just saying, if you want to use Docker, if your use case is appropriate to that, then here's how to do it, and here's a brief overview of what it does. GitHub.com/Embarcadero, that's our GitHub account, and then go to -PA server -Docker. But if you look on our Embarcadero GitHub account and just search for the word Docker, you'll find loads of them. We've been consistent in the way we've named them, so all of the repos have Docker at the end of them. So there's a few of them, and you can click in there. It's open source. You can have a look and see what's in there and how we did it. We've tried to be as open as we can. Okay, so that is that in terms of the slides. I will be doing some blog posts when I get round to it, and the posts, the replay and the slides will be at tinyurl.com/docker30, because, as you know, it's part of the whole 30 for 30 thing. Let's go back to my camera. Here I am. So let's have a look at some. And let me just, whilst we're here, I'm going to close my annoying preview so that goes away. There you go. Good. Goodbye, PowerPoint. You're annoying. We do use other things other than PowerPoint. Right, so let's just have a look, because lots of people saying lots of things about things. Coda says, demo time. Hands, yellow, red heart. Oh, like, oh, lovely. Yes, people like the demo. As I kind of answered before, it's kind of a ubiquitous application installer. Not really. It's more like a kind of different type of virtual machine that's closed. and allows your app to run inside there. So you can take a Linux app and it will run completely self-contained, and it can be as complicated as you like. Could be a server, could be, anything you like, and it's sealed into that container, and then it can run on anything. So you can take a Linux app, containerize it into Docker, and have it running on a Mac. You can take exactly the same container, put it on a Linux machine. Doesn't matter what version of Linux is. Doesn't matter if it's an old or out of date one or an up to date one. As long as it's got Docker installed on it, it will run. Same with the server. You've got a Red Hat enterprise server or something like that, which costs quite a lot of money, and you want to have RAD server running on it, or even if you wanted to have web stencils or something like that, then you can do that. You can run that on there. It will work. And I believe we've got a Linux version of that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we may have a Linux version of web stencils in the demos as well, but you need to check that. Ricardo says, very interesting. I'm learning about Tanzu and OpenShift in recent days. Yes, there are quite a few containerization options around, so it's interesting stuff. And then you have to integrate a build tool that distributes all the projects in the group. If I have 7 projects, actually, do you know what? This goes back to what someone else was asking me the other day about code signing. I don't know whether you know, but if you go to RAD Studio in the options for the project, there is a build events. Just search for it and you'll find it. Build events. And you can have build events for the project that do code signing or copy it to a different location, built executable to a different location or whatever. And part of that could be updating your containerization image, your Docker image. You can do that with build events. So RAD Studio is very capable. A lot of the time, I don't think people sometimes realize all the things it can do because it does a lot. The most important thing about RAD Studio is, and I know this sounds like a sales pitch, but I assure you it isn't, is that you can write a program, a GUI program for iOS, and then just with a double click, as you saw me do with Windows and Linux today, double click, recompile it, and out comes an Android app. And as I showed you in the demo there, I started by demoing the Windows command line app. It said hello Delphi, and then double clicked and said, right, now build it for Linux. Bang, it comes out and it's a Linux app. No changes, 0 changes to code. And this is one of the great strengths of RAD Studio. People get so used to it, they don't realize it's actually very difficult to do using other technologies. I get it. Look, my shirt here, let me just hide that. My shirt says Embarcadero, okay? And I always dress the same way when I'm representing the company, so I work for them, and so my advice is attenuated by what our message is, and I'm going to talk about our products. But I don't believe in running other products to the ground. I believe that the way that we succeed is by showing the strengths of what we do, and you can go and look at other competitors and decide whether they match up to what we do. And sometimes some of the things are going to be better. It's going to happen. That's otherwise there wouldn't be 55 different car manufacturers, would there? There wouldn't be a Tesla and a Leaf, electric cars. Some people hate Tesla, some people love Tesla, some people like the Leaf or whatever it's called, and some people hate it. Some people don't want an electric car, they want a gas or a petrol driven car, and some people say, oh god, no, I don't want, I want to save the planet, I want to have an electric car. Choices are what's important, and so I try and show what our product can do. I'm not going to go and say everybody else does it the horrible way. I think you should go and find out and look for yourself, and then see how we do it and decide for yourself whether what we do is something that works for you. But I genuinely believe that what we offer is particularly with multi-platform, is almost unbeatable. There are some that do similar things, but and there's some web apps that can go to different applications, but creating a native application that can work on Mac, Linux, and Windows with the same code base, command line or GUI is almost unique. And the same with iOS and Android from the same code base, almost unique. Not unique, but almost unique. And what we do really well, I believe. And you know, try it for yourself and have a look. I wanted to show you today Docker so that you could get some idea of how you can containerize those apps. If you're creating a server app and you want it to just work any server, someone says, "Oh, does it work under Windows 2022?" Yeah, it does. Does it work under my Red Hat Enterprise Linux? What do I need to install? Nothing. Install Docker. Once you've got that installed, you can draw down the container that you personally have created, and it will run. Does it work? Does it work on my Mac? Yes. I have a Mac server. Does it work on? Yes. Does it work on Mac Pro? Yes. Does it work on a MacBook? Yes. Does it work on a Windows laptop? Yes. That's what containerization can do for you. You just write it, and if you're writing for Linux, you just create your app, and that's the end of it. You can create containers for Windows, but it's a bit shaky. Microsoft aren't very keen on that. They want to have you have things in the cloud. More importantly, as I showed you earlier on, as I talked at the start of this webinar, you can create your Docker image and then have it running on the Amazon cloud or the Google cloud. And you just create an app, you test it locally, everything works. You know, once you put it into that Amazon container cloud location, it works. Some questions about Podman. Probably best to Google that. What's my comment on Podman? Nothing. It's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Tools like GitLab or Azure, both combined with Kubernetes, help very much to automate the process. A very big comment, but Ricardo Arduino, we will definitely put that up. But the idea should be to split an application into atomic services and update only some of them. Yes. And we're going to have a webinar in the future about exactly that, microservices, and what microservices are and how you can create them in Rad Studio, because that's really something we can do really well. Through the whole 30 for 30 webinars, I've tried to create some topics that are stupid, like not a hot dog. If you saw that with Richard Hadden or myself, then it was a fun, jokey thing. But you know, we created an app that ran on an Android, and by the way, it's still running on my Android, I believe. Let me just see if I've still got it here. Yeah, created not a hot dog, and I can take an image of something, and I'll take a photo of my Buddha. I have a Buddha down here. Not a hot dog. Correct. Buddha is not a hot dog. And I don't have a hot dog to test, but you know, that app works under Linux, under Android and iOS, and it was a fun thing that we did just for the sheer heck of it. Okay. But what were we doing there? AI object recognition in an app in about 10 lines of code. So, you know, that's the point I'm making here, is that the webinars, we're showing you as much as we can. We're only halfway through, I think. I'm not sure what one we're up to. I think we're up to like number 12 or something like that, sort of blurring into one, but that's where we go. So microservices, yeah, great. Yeah, Matthias Bollinger says, in his opinion, Docker is not suitable for client apps. At the end user, Docker is best for server apps. Yeah, it's. I mean, why? If you're going to do a client apps, I guess if you are a corporate environment and you know you've got the Docker runtime running on a client machine, then you can do it that way. But if they all had Linux desktop, for example, and you were a school, then you probably wouldn't package your app in a Docker container. You would probably have it on a server, and then it would connect to the app as a web app or something like that, using web services or something like that, and go from there. What else have we got? I prefer to use. Oh, and the are using infrastructure very close to production for two link servers, Kubernetes, Podmaster, and Podworker, and DB and Windows PC with Delphi. There you go. So there are people there that are using it. Let's just briefly pull up a few things. So just want you to know about this. We've got a special offer at the moment, so this is kind of like a sales plug, and that is you get up to 30% off of Rad Studio. So if you haven't got Rad Studio, go to the website, go to there, or go to embarcadero.com, click on products, and download a free trial. If you qualify for it, you can use the community edition, but I think the community edition won't create Linux apps, so you would need to do a Windows app or iOS and Android. So you can create mobile apps, but if you wanted to do this stuff, then it's more enterprisey kind of stuff, then you would probably need a paid version. But you can do a trial and get 30% off of everything anyway as well. What else have we got? There's something else. Yes, go to the Rad Studio Docker site. You can scan that there. And also, just a little plug as well for Blaise Pascal magazine. Because I work quite closely, I speak to him at least every month and sometimes every week or more often. Detlef Overbeek, who is the editor of Blaise Pascal magazine, we create more and more Delphi related articles in that magazine. It's the only magazine available at the moment that is dedicated to Object Pascal, Free Pascal, Lazarus, Delphi, and Turbo Pascal, and all the other variants as well. But I write for that magazine, as part of what I do. But if you're interested in getting a magazine, go to blaisepascalmagazine.eu and take a look. I can't remember what my article is about this month. I think Delphi's 30th or something like that. Anyway, let's call it a day. I think, let me see, where are we at? Just any news on for Interbase Docker image? Go to there and it's ready. You can download it. What's news that you need for it? It's already updated and working as far as I'm aware. If there's a problem, just let me know. If there's a problem, let me just pull that up again. I'm going to put the QR code up there. Go to, I don't have yes I do. Go to there and look for the Interbase one. It is there. There's a Docker-Interbase, but if there's a problem, then post a ticket for it, an issue for it, and then we can update it. Are client devices printing USB ports visible to Docker containers? Actually, I don't think they are. Richard, if you're still on the chat, he's probably gone by now, but I don't know whether you can I think the whole point about it is that you can't access the machine's resources. You can surface some of those things, but I'm not entirely sure. I've never needed to do it, to be honest, so I don't know the answer. I think you can, but it's one of those things where you can say, oh, you need to make it explicitly insecure, because it's considered insecure for a Docker container to be able to do anything outside of the container. So you do need a kind of interactive and risky sort of scenario for that to work. So Didier, I don't know is the answer. Go to Docker and ask on Docker. The benefit of having this technology that's kind of used by other people is there's a lot of advice out there, and it'll tell you all about it. Anyway, I think that's it for now. I want to thank you all for joining, and I will see you again on Tuesday at the same time. And on Tuesday, let me see if I've got my webinar brief here. No, I don't have it up at the moment. Oh, that's a shame. Yeah. Not sure what our next webinar is about. Let me just see if I can pull it up, because it would be nice to know, wouldn't it, if I could tell everybody. DevRel webinars, here we go. So the next Tuesday. Oh yes. Okay. 5 ways to create PDFs in your apps. And actually, this is a very interesting demo that I'm going to do on Tuesday. And that is there's more than one way to create PDFs from your apps, and some of them are completely free, and some of them are paid, and some of them are actually quite cost effective in terms of cost. Uh, Patrick says Visuino live Q&A with the creator Boyan Maitov. When's that, Patrick? Is that tomorrow, isn't it? I think. I'm going to wait for Patrick to post that in because I would like to post in there. Let me just see what it is. Yeah, I think I'm going to post this in the chat as well. How to send money to Ron? Yeah, nice try, Ron. Let me just add this in here. So Boyan Maitov, who is always here, and I think it's tomorrow. He's doing a live Q&A. If you're into the Internet of Things, and if you look behind me where I'm pointing, I have loads of Internet of Things devices in here in my office. Boyan is the guy for that. Visuino is his IDE. It's written in Delphi. And Boyan says, yes, it is live Q&A tomorrow is 11 a.m. Pacific time. So let me just work out what that is. So it'll be just half an hour ago. If you're watching this live, he would have started this time tomorrow, half an hour ago. And Farine, it's Tuesday, 5 ways to create PDFs in your apps. Yes, thank you, Patrick. It is. Yeah. So Boyan, if you are interested, go to his website, but also he's got a live channel thing here. I'm going to leave that up so that you can scan it. Look, you really should support Boyan. He's a great guy. He's a genius, an absolute genius. I get very well with him, and also he's a regular for this show. He doesn't have to, but he chooses to do it. But Boyan Maitov, very knowledgeable guy about anything that you want to plug into your computer. Boyan is the guy. But look at it at maitov.com and you'll see what I mean. Good stuff. All right. Well, I'm going to go, and Jim McKeith will be moderating it, will he? Oh, well, I might have to join in and rag you guys, then, won't I? I'll try and see if I can join in the chat. I'm really busy tomorrow. Actually, got some stuff to do, but we'll see. Yeah, Jim McKeith, my predecessor in the company. Good luck. All right, and thanks very much, everyone. I hope you found it useful. I think a few people did. Docker, look it up. It's great fun. It's very, very useful. Mostly for servers, but you can use it clients as well. It simplifies deployment of all sorts of apps, and we can go from there. Anyway, I will. Matthias says Delphi is really great for servers in general. Developing Delphi compiled to Linux and deploy it via Docker. Yeah. And same with Windows. You can create Windows services. You can create Linux daemons. You name it, you can do it. It's and Mac as well. It's all good stuff. Okay. In the meantime, I will say goodbye to everybody, as is Patrick. Au revoir, Patrick. Salut. And I will see you on Tuesday, everybody, around the country. But for now,